business. It's business time. Hang tight, we're gonna get into the business right here in a couple minutes. Baby, baby. It's business. It's business time. All right, we are here with week 10 of It's Business Time. We got Jeremiah Tubbs in the house from RL Solutions. Thank you for joining, my man. Before we get rocking, though, I do want to give a quick shout-out to Stitch House for having us. It is awesome to be here. Woo, woo. They are here with 12 different original local products, beers on draft every time, so come through, check some of those out. I myself am drinking the Shane's Last Call, the Belgian Light. I love a good Belgian, and this is definitely not a 9%er, which is nice. What do you got going on here, Jeremiah?
I got the Tropic Lightning.
Tropic Lightning. Well, good choice. That's the grapefruit IPA, right? So thanks again to Stitch House for having us. I saw you had the barbecue burger too. You know, they do have great food here as well. So make sure to come through, support your local businesses. And with that, you know, let's get into it. So thank you again so much for joining us. Jeremiah, again, RL Solutions. Make sure to check him out. But I want to just kind of start with tell us a little bit about, you know, how you got started here, and we'll work our way up. I got a bunch of questions about where you're at now, but I do like to do a little bit of background before we get started. So you know, kind of what got you into this space, like real estate renovations, all that. What got you into this space, and you know, what were the first months, years like growing?
So when I first started out doing construction, real estate stuff, I'd just gotten laid off from a job I had. It was another small business. They had to let me go. And I was like, well, I've always wanted to do my own thing, so I'll start on that. And when I started, I wasn't sure what I was going to do exactly. Like, doing construction wasn't my goal in mind. But I've always been good at fixing stuff, always been good at figuring out problems. And so I started doing handyman stuff. Mm-hmm. And I did that because one of the reasons why I did that was because I figured I'm good at fixing stuff with my hands, and everybody lives in a house. So, like, I can work anywhere.
Right.
And ironically, doing construction is a very big customer-oriented business. So, like, once you get a customer base, you're kind of stuck in that area.
Right.
Which was the opposite of what I was planning on, but it worked.
Right. Yeah. It's very common, I think, a lot of businesses to start in a freelance space, you know, to kind of be in between opportunities, start in a freelance space. And honestly, if you do good work, you get good referrals. And the next thing you know, you're like, wow, I'm running. This is, did you have like a big contract early? Did you have something where the light bulb went off and you said, I'm definitely going to be here for a while?
So one of the things that helped me early out was basically just saying yes to anything, and then a lot of YouTube and Google later.
You sound like you're about to write a bestseller at some point. Say yes to anything. You know?
And one of my first big jobs was, ironically, a wallpaper job. Now, there's you don't see a lot of wallpaper out there.
No, you don't.
But there is actually wallpaper all around you. Almost any bank you walk into, almost any Wendy's, McDonald's, anything like that, they all have wallpaper.
Right.
Any building you go into, except for this one that has like a mural on the wall, it's wallpaper. And so it's actually a big space out there, and it's one of the things I didn't know about until I jumped in.
Right.
And I actually got a good mentor from saying yes to that job and putting my whole heart and soul into it, doing the best I could, long hours. And the guy I did the job for, I outbid a friend of his who is a professional wallpaper.
Gotcha.
And so his friend comes in after I'm done with the job and checks my work.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And he was impressed. So he hired me to help him do a bank. And so he taught me painting and drywall repair and all this other stuff that you need to know to do wallpaper. That, you know, and that's another thing, say yes to anything.
Yeah.
He was like, hey, come work for me. And I was like, sure. So I subcontracted for him. And he was able to teach me all sorts of skills, hands-on. I get paid for it, and and then now he's a referral, and I guess you could say a customer of mine.
Right.
And that's kind of how I grew. was in that style.
Yeah, in the early days, there normally is like that one good one. You know, I have a saying, it's like you can either find 100 people to give you $1, or you can find one person to give you 100, right? Most businesses find their way right in the middle, like 2 people who give them 50 type thing, right? But there normally is that one big client early on that the light bulb goes off and you say, well, with this amount of business or these referrals, that's enough for me to cover all my bills and things like that, and now I can start to build on top of that. So the wallpaper job, that's a great kind of example of a space you weren't expecting. Well, you know, we had Joel on last week, Joel Margovich.
He's a good friend of mine.
Yeah, and he was actually the one who recommended you. And, you know, when he was telling his story of the early days, it was a menu of options. Like, I'll do anything. I do all of this stuff, and I'll do anything in this category. And then as the company kind of grew, he found the niches that were really, he was adding the most value, we might say.
That's actually about the point where I'm at now. Okay. So I realized having a menu of everything, I kept shooting myself in the foot because I would do something that I'm not really set up for ideally.
Right.
And so then I got to go buy a whole bunch of extra special tools.
Your margins
and stuff.
vanish.
Yeah, and I make no money on the job. And then I don't get the same job for like 6 months.
Right.
So I just wasted all that money, you know. And so the thing that I realized just back in June, actually, is I realized that to push my business past where I was, which was just me and a bunch of customers and doing the best I could. And I was kind of living the life, you know. I was freelancing. I could work whenever I wanted to. Right. You know, I was making decent money. I could pay all my bills. But there wasn't that satisfaction at the end. And sometimes, like I said, I'd shoot myself in the foot, and then I got long days and stuff. So I had this revelation. I'm like, well, I need to when I run into a problem, like the problem that got me into hiring other people was my schedule. My schedule was very bad. Most of it was in my head, and most that was in my head would get forgotten. Yeah. You know, so I hired a guy to do my schedule. And within like 2 months, he almost doubled my income. Yeah. Just by hiring a guy for a specific task that he's good at that I'm not good at.
Let me repeat that for everybody at home. You hired someone to manage your schedule, and that almost doubled your business.
Within like 2 or 3 months.
Within 2 or 3 months. Yeah. No, and I love that because that's so often you hear stories about small business entrepreneurs or owners that are trying to do all the tasks. And, you know, sometimes they don't have the income to hire people, but at the same time, there's just this belief, you know, there's like the grind culture. I don't actually subscribe to grind culture, but there's this belief that if you just do everything really, really well, then you're just going to explode. But the reality is you burn yourself out. You know, and not everybody's good at everything. There's personality types that are great at scheduling, and there's personality types that are not. I myself, I struggle with scheduling myself. I'm very creative. I'm a problem solver, all those things. But when it comes to tracking and writing everybody's names down in Excel spreadsheets and keeping track of all that stuff without a little bit of help goes a long way in that space.
Now, I actually did not have the money to hire him. I paid him on a credit card. So it was a gamble on my side. It was also a gamble on his side because he had a full-time job and he was leaving his job to come work for me. Right. And that was the truce. Was like, I'd known him since I moved here to Delaware. Right. So he's a good friend of mine. But that was the truce. Like, I'm paying you to do something. I don't even know if it's going to help me. Right. I mean, in theory, it would help me. But stuff on paper doesn't always work out in real life. Definitely. And then also, he was taking the risk of leaving his job that paid for his rent to come work for me. So, like, it was this mutual thing, and it just flourished into something that was, you know, now I've got, like, 6 people working for me off of that just one hire. Yeah. That would have never happened before. Yeah, and I love having you here for that reason. Like, that's the story, right? You're starting to recognize that you need some help. You find someone. You get creative about payroll, right? Because payroll can be a killer. Overhead can be a killer for people. You get creative about payroll, and then that blossoms you into 6 employees, which really that's a critical period, I think, in a lot of small businesses, right? Like, you get to the point. I had Rob Vanderdecker here from Summit Mechanical a couple weeks ago. They're at 60 employees now, but that fluctuation between 40 and 60,
you kind of have this balance. You can't afford to keep everybody on when there isn't work. But then when there is work, if you didn't provide it for them, a lot of those guys start to look for work elsewhere, right? So finding that balance between bringing people in and being able to give them regular work is tough. And it sounds like part of that solution was your scheduling person.
Well, and also one of the things that helped me was realizing that the thing I thought I was good at is not necessarily the thing I was best at.
Right.
So I'm really good at figuring out problems, fixing things. You can give me a thing that's broken and like 5 random things, and I'll MacGyver it together and make it work.
Yeah, I love it.
And that's literally how my work is a lot of times, that I MacGyver things to work that really shouldn't work.
Right.
But I thought that's what I was best at. But really, the part that I'm best at is selling to the customer.
Right.
And I didn't realize that my success was me being able to sell to the customer. And so if I just focus on what I'm best at, and James focuses on what he's best at, and Ishmael focuses on what he's best at,
right.
All on and on, all the people that I've got, then together we can do something that's bigger than just separate.
Yeah. Do you mind elaborating a little? What do you feel makes you good at? Now selling is like it's one of these terms that in some spaces can sound like, oh, salesy and blah blah blah, but it's what do you feel that kind of like helps you stand out in that space, or you're comfortable in that space? Is it information? Is it
Well, I feel like part of the reason why I'm so good at selling what I do is because I really know what I'm doing.
Right. Okay.
But also, you just have to build that relationship with the customer. You have to look at them. Like the way that I explain to my customers is like, when I'm doing a job for you, I pretend I'm you.
Right.
So I'm doing for you what I want done for me.
Right.
And if you put yourself in that mindset to where you're looking at from their eyes,
right,
then it's a lot easier to sell to them, because you see the mistake here and you're like, that would not fly for me. And so you've got 2 options. You either put in that overtime and get it done right, or sometimes you just ask the customer and they're like, oh, I don't care about that. And then now you just got a free write-off to leave that one thing that's a problem that might be extra,
Right.
Because I notice things that are extra on a job all the time. And so you get that possible upsell, plus also a lot of times I'll add things into a job while I'm there.
Right.
Because one of the most expensive parts is me getting there to the job.
Yep.
So if I'm there at the job and you've got this, outlet cover that's broken, I'll probably just throw in one for free just because I'm here already,
Right.
And so I just try to create that relationship with the customer, and I really feel like after hiring on other people, that's really my most important contribution to the business.
Yeah, where you add the most value. Yeah, definitely. And a lot of it, like a lot of early days of small business, is the owner it has to start stepping back and allowing other people to fill those spaces. I've been in businesses.
That's a lot harder than it sounds, at least for me.
It is. It really is. And I've been in businesses where, my partners or whomever, they try to step back, and every time they step back, something starts to fall through the cracks, and then they jump back in again and step back and jump back in and step back. And a lot of businesses can't sustain that, allow their employees or allow their partners to fail a few times until they start succeeding.
Yep.
That's a reasonable segue to my favorite question, which is like, so you were growing. You started in 2017, right?
2018.
In this
January.
area, this area at least.
Well, in Delaware, I started January of 2020 is when I officially started working in Delaware.
Okay, gotcha. And in that time, you've grown to 6 employees. Was there a period? Was there a job? Was there a moment where you said, this is just way too much to deal with? I should just go work for another company. I can just collect a paycheck at 5 o'clock. I can punch out and not worry about this. Like, and if there was that period, like, what was there anything you did to mentally get through that moment and stay on track?
Yeah, I guess I have had that thought several times.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, it's a little hard for me to answer, because for me, my company is a problem-solving company,
right.
And so that's a problem.
Right.
And the way I solve it is like, Do I need to start putting in more hours? Do I need
Right.
to hire another person? Like I start troubleshooting what's the root cause of this one, because it's not always the same thing that happens each time you're like, man, I just need to go get a regular job.
Yeah.
And honestly, that was about the time when I hired James, because the month before I hired James, my business made like $2,000,
Right.
which like that doesn't pay rent, you know? So
Right.
like, so it's like, all right, what am I doing here? Should I just go get a job? And that's when I really sat down. And I feel like that's part of the answer to your question is you just need to sit down and have like that honest conversation with yourself. Like,
Right.
why am I here? Why am I doing this? If I quit, what are my customers going to do? Like
Right.
my customers rely on me, even though at that point it was just me.
Yeah.
And it's like, there was actually a old man who I worked for once, and he used to do contracting. And he said, you need to raise your prices. I'm like, what do you mean? I don't need to raise my prices. I've got plenty of money. At this point, I was living in my parents' house. Like
Right.
my monthly bills were like $200 a month. So
Right.
like I could work one day and pay everything.
Right. Right.
You know? And he's like, no, you need to raise your prices. And I'm like, I didn't understand why. He said, you need to raise your prices because one day something's going to happen and you're going to break your leg. Your truck's going to break down.
Right,
Something's going
right.
to happen. And if you don't raise your prices now, you will not have that nest egg later.
Yep.
And then now you're actually hurting all your customers that rely on you. He says charging a little extra is not going to hurt your customers because that's what goes on in your mind. You're like,
Right.
I don't want my customer to go to somebody else, or like, you know, my customer's poor, he can't really afford anything.
Right.
But like, you need to have that higher standard because you are providing that higher standard of work. And if something happens, which happened to me,
Yeah.
2021, I was going to work. It was 6 a.m. It was dark. It was probably about this time of year.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, no, it was springtime. And this lady runs a red light in front of my truck. My truck weighs 8,000 pounds. So, like,
Yeah.
it's not stopping on a dime.
Right.
And I T-boned the lady. Totals the truck.
Oof.
And because of that, within, I think it was a month, I was able to buy another used truck with cash and
Yeah.
get back to rolling.
Wow.
Because of this guy several years prior that told me, you have to raise your prices. And I listened to him, and it literally saved my business.
Yeah. No, pricing is probably one of the hardest things for any small business to do because, you know, once you get to a certain size and people know your brand, they know what you do, they can look at your price schedule and be like, all right, I'm either going to work with them or I'm not, right? But when you're small and you're kind of growing, it's like it's not uncommon to say, here's my price for me to have the type of margins I need to grow my business and pay my employees. But then they say, well, I can't afford that, but I still want to work with you. And that's when you got to get creative and be like, well, I can offer this discount if we can take pictures of your house when it's done, you know, or I can offer this discount if you like give me 2 referrals, things like you can get creative.
Or something that I've had success with is just being like, I'll do payments.
Yeah.
And so like I'll take $100 a month for the next 6 months or whatever.
That's something to consider. Jeremiah does payment plans. So, you know, if you were wondering where you're going to come up with the money to get that major project done, there aren't a lot of companies that do that at a size where you actually get to meet the owner too on the site. So
we actually have a meeting with the bank tomorrow, and we might actually be able to provide financing also now. But before that was an option, we just do payments. Now sometimes, like you're saying, it would hurt a little bit.
Yeah.
Because you're like, I really need that money to put gas in the truck.
Right.
But, you know, you got to get creative again. And so it's also kind of nice because when you do payments, and this is something for listeners to think about, is it's a little surprise. Next month you get $100 and you didn't do you didn't do anything for it, even though, you know, it's money from before. It feels nice to get, you know, some money for something that you didn't work for.
it's cash flow, you know. That kill what you eat business model it's tough in the long run, you know. If you have a good month, everybody eats. If you have a bad month, you got to tell people I don't have work for you. But if you do have customers who are on kind of like a payment plan, it's good for them, right? Because they don't have to come up with all the cash and stress their budget. But it's also great for a growing business to have that reoccurring revenue for sure.
And your thing with the pictures and stuff, that's true too. And that's how I kind of deal with jobs that go over budget sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
There's a job we did recently. We charged them a fair price for the job, but the job went way over schedule. There was a bunch of issues with subcontractors and all sorts of other things, but I'm keeping the price the same because the end result is going to, like you were saying with the pictures and stuff, it's going to be worth it for the advertising and stuff like that. So it hurts now, but and that's the thing. You can weigh it. Be like, should I approach the customer for more, or should I just eat a little bit and use it as a marketing and then also that customer feels good too because you're like, hey, I really should have done this. I always try to be as transparent as possible with my customers because again, I'm trying to see them as me.
Right.
And so I want to know why. I'm very cheap. Like I would honestly never pay somebody as much as I charge.
Right.
Just because like I am so also I know how to do it. So but I have to justify that to myself when I'm talking to the customer, and that's part of my when I'm talking to the customer, I'm talking to myself, and that's why it's just that mental thing that I'm going on in my background while I'm talking to the customer, either via phone call, in person, text message, email. Always try to give that empathy and that care that's going to give them that feeling that you care for them, which I do because I want them to come back.
Well, it's interesting. It's very obvious that you care about your customers, particularly when I talk about what was that tough moment, and you're like, well, if I went out of business, what would these people do? What would these customers do? That's true empathy too. And I will say for those at home, this is why small businesses are so valuable to your community, because when you're talking to the owner, when you're talking, the people who are working on your house are the ones who are actually paying their mortgage and raising their children and all that with this project. Not only is there a level of flexibility with pricing, but it's also something that it is incredibly valuable to them. They do the work for you, they take that money, and they build a life with that, which is substantially different. Once a company gets over 100, 200 employees, 30 to 40% of that money isn't going to anybody on the job site, and in some cases probably 60 to 70%. But yeah, that is awesome. I would love to hear. So I used to do like landscaping construction back in the day. I would love to hear a lot of stories, but in the interest of time, we are trying to keep this series like right around 20 minutes. So if you don't mind, I'd like to give a real quick commercial for you here. But RL Solutions, they do repairs, renovations, rehabs, cleanings, Airbnb, buying, selling, renting, investing, and property management. I know you're a lot in the real estate and space as well, so definitely check them out. RL Solutions. We got Jeremiah Tubbs here. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention here before you go? Any companies or projects or anything coming up? All good either way. I didn't mean to put you on the spot there, but
that wasn't exactly where I thought your question was going.
Oh, where did you think it was going?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things to where it's important to do stuff with your property because it can actually be a health and safety issue too. That's part of the reason why I'm a little stuffy on this podcast is because the property I was working at, they had a big rat and mouse infestation.
Yeah.
And that stuff can really get to you.
Yeah.
So like that caused my immune system to go down. I got sick, all this stuff because of the feces and whatnot. So like, that's one of the things that like, it's not, I'm trying to get more money out of the customer by doing things, but it's like, it's actually concern where it's like, if you don't get that leak fixed, then your little kid might have issues with asthma because of the mold.
And
and so like, it's a thing that's important. So don't necessarily put off repairs.
Right.
But then, like we said, stuff's very expensive these days.
Yeah.
And so it's a give and a take. It's a balancing thing, but it is important to make sure things are fixed and working properly because it can be a health issue.
Yeah.
To not have things.
Well, you're clearly knowledgeable. You clearly care. Definitely, I appreciate having you through so much. Your business is right at that place too, where, it sounds like you're rocking and rolling already, but of course, too, for those of you out there who are looking for the type of work Jeremiah does, you can reach him right here, RL Solutions. And thank you again for coming through. This has been awesome. Great to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for the podcast.
Absolutely, and thank you for Stitch House for having us. And that wraps up week 10 of It's Business Time. Thank you all. Have a great one.